Hi, I'm Andrew McLaren.
And I'm Mark Ridley.
Welcome to the Teamcraft podcast,
where we talk about the tradecraft and sometimes the witchcraft of what it means to work together in a team.
Today we're joined by Alina Kessel. Alina is a global client leader at WPP, a leading international marketing communications company. She has over 25 years of experience building global brands for large multinational clients, helping them grow their business through communications, experience, commerce, and technology. Originally from Ukraine and a US national, Alina has lived and worked in the UK, the US, Australia, and Germany, where she was the CEO of Grey Advertising and later of DDB Tribal Group. In today's episode, we hear about Alina's journey from a young advertising executive in New York to her current leadership role in one of the world's largest advertising and communications companies. We discuss the importance of high professional standards in teams, the benefits of both working and playing together, how chemistry and shared culture is crucial to high performance, and the unexpected benefits of a scavenger hunt in the woods.
The first thing to say is that no client structure is the same. We literally have bespoke teams that we set up for clients based on their needs, their priorities, how they're structured. Many moons ago, somebody I worked with used the phrase structure follows business, and that's essentially what we do for our clients. So in the case of WPP, which is the company that I work for, we have a number of people, such as myself, called global client leaders on our largest, generally multinational businesses, and we set up our teams according to what their needs are. Typically, though, it is a combination of, so for a client, we look after all of their communication needs. There's the creative side of things, so the ads that you see on TV, online, in your newspapers, on your billboards, as you scroll through your social feeds, etc. There's that bit of it. There's the media aspect of it, who plans and buys media so that you actually get to see these ads at certain times. There's a design side of it. So how do we design the packaging of products that our clients use, or also design the experiences that our consumers go through? There is PR, corporate PR for the clients, but also PR for each of their brands, earned, owned, etc. There is a term that's being used, which is digital, which is ridiculous because everything is digital these days. But some clients, depending on their level of maturity, still separate digital from classical, let's say, advertising. There's research. So in other words, there's lots of different disciplines, and obviously technology now plays a big role in it. And we have a lot of technologists and creative technologists within WPP that also work on the business. My role as a global client leader is to package up these teams in such a way that we can deliver to the needs of our clients wherever they have those needs. I have a very small central interdisciplinary team, which is made up of people who have these different capabilities, who come from different agencies with these capabilities. They sit on my round table. And then we have literally thousands of people around the world in different agencies that touch that client's business, who we try to connect with to make sure that we're all still functioning as one team, even though they're quite far apart and remote and are not dedicated to our business. So small core team, totally interdisciplinary, agency agnostic, and a large full team that's there to tap into and flex as needed based on the needs of the clients at a given time. I hope that explains a little bit.
The thought of bringing all of those disparate elements together sounds like a huge challenge, especially because this coming from so many different backgrounds. And as you said, there's a huge creative part of that. It's collaborative. And these people are therefore a member of a number of teams. And I think I remember when we first started talking, you were Team GSK. And so you're part of WPP, part of Grey at the time, part of Team GS. So there is a sense that the people that are working for a client are a number of many teams at the same time.
Yeah, and that's challenging.
How do you cope with it at any level?
Well, so if I start from where I'm sitting, the first thing that I do when I take on a role like this, knowing that, as you said, these people have various allegiances, let's say, right, is to develop a team culture for our team. It's really, really critical to establish a culture for the team that you're gathering the people around, because they have their own agency cultures depending on their home agency that they sit in. You know, a Gray is different to an Ogilvy, is different to a Mindshare, is different to a Hill & Knowlton Strategies, which is PR. They each have and should have their distinct cultures. They also, because my teams are global, sit in different countries, obviously, are coming from those different countries with their own cultures. And so with that, it's absolutely essential to build a culture for, in this case, Team GSK or Team P&G or whatever it is. And I do that as a very first task. And what I found to be productive, or what has worked for me in the past, is to make sure that that team culture stems from or is inspired by the culture of the client that we work on. So, for instance, GSK, or Haleon, now the spun-off consumer company, is all about healthcare, in this case, everyday health. So that winds up becoming kind of the glue that connects us. Our team is about delivering everyday health with humanity. That becomes a draw for people. So somebody who works on, I don't know, Ford 3 days of the week, and then 2 days of the week comes and works with me on Haleon, they're going to come into Haleon with this spirit and this culture of collaboration around things that are about everyday health. We are about humanity, and that humanity becomes part of the culture and how we behave together. We have very specific kind of attributes and values of being really open to new ideas, of being optimistic about the fact that, you know, getting people to be healthier is a good thing and is something that's positive that we're bringing to the world, and we're working on something important. One of our values is that we actually make things instead of just talk about it. So we really, as a team, kind of allergic to PowerPoint decks of hundreds of pages. We want to actually get out there and make stuff that creates impact, because people's health is so important and so personal and so critical, and we can actually affect it. That's like a positive cultural aspect of working on our team. And so developing that culture and those values and that positivity about what's different about working on GSK versus on some of the other brands that you might be working on is what serves as a glue, let's say, for our team.
What does building that culture look like? So you mentioned you've got your round table, but you've got a group of disparate contributors who sit in different agencies. So is it a physical round table, or is it digital, or is it, aspects of both? And secondly, if it was the start, what would you be doing? So you've got this idea, if you're trying to kind of put on the cloak of culture for the client that you're serving, what do you do to try and embed these attributes, to try and see that culture is being absorbed by the people?
Yeah, and not only around that table, but deeper into the organization, which is even more challenging. I want all those 2,000 people that touch the business to feel it somehow. So yeah, it is challenging. So to answer your question, it is a combination of a physical and a virtual. It's not quite a round table, but I had 18 people at my house 2 weeks ago for a strategy day, and we were physically sitting at a very long rectangular table. So we still, we did get people around a table and broke bread together, which I think is really, really important. So yes, we do try to do things together, physically together, as well. But of course, the bulk of what we do is virtual or mixed. And clearly technology has advanced hugely, and it's helpful to do that now. But I would say the beginning of when you form that team and when you develop that very simple strategic underpin and the cultural aspect of your team, I would always advocate try to do that in person as opposed to virtually. And I think it's worth the money and the time to get people literally around the table into a room, lock yourself up for a couple of days and come out the other end sort of with something that you really buy into. Then the bringing it to life, the living it, the embedding of the culture is difficult, and it takes on many guises. For me, I always, liken it to advertising. You need to have both reach and frequency. So you need to over communicate constantly and make people feel what it means to live that culture. And so we try to divide it into chunks, and we say, we need to have little things, little elements of people feeling that culture, be it through stand-ups twice a week that we get on a call together for 15 minutes just to see how things are going and check in and make sure that as we do that, there's that parts of that culture are being felt that way. So twice a week we do stand-ups. Once a month we have a team leaders meeting where we talk about specific areas of which culture is always part of. How do we bring it to life? Every 2 months we have a town hall for the 2,000, let's say, people. And how we do that town hall is we have a certain way that we do it. We always have people that are chipping in. We're always calling people out to contribute live. It's never a, one-way communication. There's always a bit of fun to it. That's also part of our culture. We work hard and play hard. That kind of is felt through all of it. The events that we run tend to feel like they fit into that culture. So for instance, I mentioned having 18 people at my house 2 weeks ago. Because we're about healthcare and because we want to do things that are sort of also a little bit good for us, part of that day was that during lunch, we sent people out on a scavenger hunt in the woods to go and, find certain elements and do certain silly things. And that got us into nature. So that's quite healthy. And it got us to play together, and it had a sort of a competitive component to it. So little acts of living the culture, frequently experienced, is really important. And then you have the big ones, the tentpole moments. We focus on creativity and having great creative product. For that, twice a year, we have a creative council, which is a group of creative minds coming together around our work and really pushing ourselves to elevate the bravery of our creative work, get it ready for big award shows, et cetera, et cetera. That's a big sort of content-rich gathering, which happens only twice a year, and that's like a tentpole moment for us. Or we do, volunteering day, and that volunteering day is going to be around helping people with everyday health aspects. So you have your everyday small elements of living your culture. You have your sort of monthly, let's connect and make sure everybody is on the same page on it. You have your every 2 months town hall, and then you have your couple times a year big things that you bring people around. And it's that combination that embeds the culture in the team and allows it to thrive and to live and expand and evolve.
I wonder if you could tell us one surprising, strange, interesting thing that happened at your house that day that was related to teamwork. Because I think these occasions, there's always something that comes out of the woodwork in them that you didn't, something you didn't plan for. Was there anything that happened that day that you were like, I'm going to remember that?
Oh gosh, actually, I had people in that scavenger hunt break out into song in the middle of the woods and do jumping jacks. That was probably more funny, surprising thing. Yeah. I think some people talk about boundaries and drawing boundaries between work and home life, etc. I'm not a big believer in that. I'm not saying you should constantly work and have no boundaries, but I do think it's really important and helpful. And in my experience, people love it, that your team is also a little bit your family, genuinely. And you can feel that you not only want to deliver for each other, but you actually have a good time doing it. And you have that combination of holding each other accountable and pushing each other and keeping our standards high and focusing on the work and on the outcome. And at the same time, really enjoying the journey of it and enjoying doing it. And I think that to do that, you need to be a little bit family as well as a little bit team.
You are not the first of the guests that we have spoken to that have mentioned food as a really significant part of teamwork. So I think it's very interesting that those social settings, that there are these things around teamwork which aren't doing the work. They are absolutely around setting the culture. They're around setting the tone, but they're nothing to do with the work itself.
No, I totally agree. I wanted to just give you another example of where we also bring our clients into it, and they feel our team culture through that. I have a Christmas dinner for clients every year, and it's always quite intimate. It's not a big dog and pony show. There's like maybe 20, 25 people. We always find a very different, unexpected place to have it at. We always, we do little things like we put phrases under the plates that you have to work into a conversation with somebody that you're talking to at the table. There's always that fun aspect of it. The most hilarious one, Andrew asked me about an example from when people were at my home, but I'll give you one from one of these client dinners where the general manager of one of our big markets was sitting next to me, and she is very extravagant looking and very beautiful and very different. And I put a little phrase under her plate that said, "I only wear Versace pajamas." And hold on. And so during this dinner, we're having a good time and we're making toast. And so in this case, I think we were 30 people. So she gets up and makes this whole toast about our partnership and how well we're working together and how ambitious we are for the work and how we're delivering for consumers and how we're, focusing on improving everyday health, et cetera, et cetera. And then completely deadpan at the end of the toast says, "Oh, and by the way, I only wear Versace pajamas," and sits down. And the entire room was like, "What? What the hell was that?" Also because I could kind of see her actually wearing Versace pajamas. It was such an incredible sort of blow-away moment. And that's, those little things are what makes our culture thrive and why people love working on our teams.
You mentioned that you don't really like to draw the distinction. People talk about, home and work and so on. And what's connected to teamwork for me in that is that teams really are bound around task independence and relationship interdependence. The two things, for a team to be effective, the two things have to go together. And a lot of the stuff you're talking about there is just seeing the interpersonal stuff. We need to find ways of developing the interdependence in the relationships as well as the functional work that the team does. And it almost goes without saying, doesn't it, that you sort of have to do jumping jacks and sing in the woods, or, introduce these kind of games into a social setting in order to develop that. So that if you seek to put boundaries around it, you're probably stifling the potential for your team to thrive.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think often it's not about putting boundaries around it from what I've seen, but it's about not actively driving it. You have to give people permission to act silly and to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. Quite often that's not done. And so there is a more formal approach to teams. And I just find that to be not as effective and also just not as fun, but I think you need to actively draw people out and give them permission to get out of that formality.
And it's quite indirect as well, isn't it? So you're not saying like, okay, we're going out into the woods so that
No.
we develop stronger bonds together. Let's sit down together and try and be more intimate. And, after half an hour, we'll be a better team. It has to be.
And authentic. Absolutely.
Well, I wonder if I could change tack a little bit. There's something interesting there about setting boundaries. For me, and my understanding is that Ogilvy himself wrote in his book quite extensively about the importance of deadlines, about hitting a deadline. You spoke, Alina, just before about working hard and playing hard. Within your industry, it seems that it's almost an industry that is famous for committing to deadlines, to meeting deadlines, almost to that crunch. We're going to work very hard to deliver this. Your clients no doubt have expectations you're going to hit deadlines. You've got these teams that are brought together from lots of different agencies. You're trying to instill a culture. You still have to do the work. And so you're having to communicate. There is a deadline. We have many things that are probably going to need to all be brought together and marshaled towards this one point. How do you communicate that? Because the deadline seems such an important part of the work that you do. How do you make sure that people have real clarity about what the goal is and when they need to deliver it?
So deadline is a part of it, but if I can take what you're saying a bit broader, it is about making sure that at the end of the day, we're there to deliver the work for our clients, and that work needs to be of high quality and needs to be on time. It is sometimes a little bit harder in the creative process. Sometimes because we are creative types and ideas either come or they don't come, and you can't force, it's not a factory. You can't just manufacture an idea. It's something that sort of grows and develops and sometimes comes to you quickly in the shower, proverbial shower, or sometimes you need to sweat at it for a long time. Having said that, I think the professionalism with which we work actually does it. It's not hard work for us to be able to instill that in the people. I think they tend to come in with quite high professional standards anyway. For me, what's been more important is to ensure that we develop a real set of standards for us as a team. Like, what you consider to be professionally okay or good is not necessarily good enough for our team. And I think, getting to that place where we as a team really understand what we mean by good, what we mean by great versus what we mean by not good enough, I think is a big part of it. And there, the culture is also a huge driver of that, because nobody wants to be in a team that's not performing well, actually. You have to make people feel that it's good to do good work. And that comes through the culture too. So it's not specific to deadlines. It's part of it. It's not specific to the type of work that you need to do. Most of the time people know that. It's about, how do we know that what you've done is good enough? How do we continue to raise the bar? How do we continue to push for greater? And that comes through developing that common language, through looking at the work, actually being able to have a discussion of, is this good? Is this not good? Being able to challenge each other on going further. I do have a slight thing in my team where a lot of time people say, oh, Alina is always going to say we're not quite there yet. So I think that's just, that's another way of sort of driving that set of standards. The leader themselves, they have to demonstrate doing that work and not just talking about it. I think that's part of it too. And there's a wonderful, I don't know, Mark, if you and I talked about it, but Frances Frye, I might have mentioned her to you, the Harvard professor who's also written several books and does a lot of talks about trust triangles and teamwork. She has this wonderful concept of high standards and deep devotion, and the fact that those two have to be in balance. You need to make sure that you set the high standards and help people live up to those high standards. And at the same time, you have to make people feel that you're completely devoted to their success. And if you just set high standards, but you don't help them achieve it and you don't care about their success, you become a bitch, excuse my language, and nobody wants to work for you. And if you just are nice to people and say, oh, you're going to do better next time, unlucky, it was okay, oh, that's very nice, etc., and you don't keep them to the higher standards, they're never going to succeed because they won't progress. So really that balance is critical. And I love that concept, and I try to live by it, and I try to instill that in my team, and everybody I talk to about it, my team gets it and sort of tries to live it. And that's a way to get to your deadlines and to your good content.
Can I just dig into the performance element there? So you mentioned the high professional standard. How explicit can you be about what high professional standards are? Because I might have a concept of my high professional standards, and they may not live up to those of the team around me. It doesn't sound like you have to do this with many of the people that are joining the team. And I realize there is a cultural and sort of implicit element of that quality isn't good enough. But is there anything that you can do around explicitly calling out this is what the expectation of a high professional standard is? How do you communicate that to people? Is it all implicit, or can you actually do explicit training and communication of what's expected?
It is both, definitely. So you do have training. I mean, we train a lot. We train our people a lot. A lot of it is through the onboarding process. If you talk about junior people, we would go through, this is what a good meeting report looks like after you have a client meeting. It has to be out within 48 hours, definitely, latest, those sorts of things. So there are very specific kind of elements of the day-to-day work that the people get through direct examples and teachings and leadership, and through the more sort of broader training methods within the company. We do quite a bit of training actually within WPP. Also when it comes to how to be a better business partner, for example, for your clients, or the whole sort of tech area, specific sort of AI training, quite deep and narrow and quite broad, expansive as well. So training is definitely important, depending on which function you have within the agency, be it account management, so the meeting reports after meetings with clients become important, or a creative, so way of doing a print ad is considered to be good versus not good. Or if you are looking at a campaign, before you go to present it to the client, you should be able to understand how it's researched and be able to evaluate the research results that you got from your research partners, not just take the list of numbers to the client. You need to be able to evaluate them, analyze them, draw conclusions out of them, give areas to your clients that you think are working versus need to be poked at, etc. But yes, specific training and teaching is a big part of it.
Once they've gone through that process of training, is there a view you would like to have as the leader as to whether that training is working? So a thing I have in my head as a hypothetical example is you mentioned the idea of standards, and Alina is famous for saying we're not quite there yet. So that could actually be a phrase that is considered as a very healthy thing of standards, and we're, you mentioned deep devotion, we're devoted to meeting those standards. It could also be in an alternative culture, it could be viewed as a very negative thing, as a sort of, there's an autocrat at the top who is never happy. Do your team members, are they active in correcting, encouraging, resolving standards for each other, as well as it being that kind of dyad between you and your team members? And is that something you look to sort of foster?
Totally. You have to foster it. Otherwise you do become an autocrat, and then nobody wants to work in a team like that. Hence that combination of high standards, deep devotion, and keeping that in balance. So yes. And the most important thing a leader can do, another phrase from Frances Fry, you can see that I'm a fan, is she talks about the purpose of leadership being to help people be better in your presence so that they can thrive in your absence. And I think, again, that's a really powerful concept that I try to foster within my teams, so that everybody, through the power of observation and working together and seeing how things are, and seeing that all of us, myself included, I'm very, I'm almost always not quite there yet on my own stuff. So I think that makes the people behave that way with their own teams. Again, in a balanced, high standards, deep devotion way, not as this is what I want. You've screwed up. This isn't good. We don't have that. I mean, there's one of the values that we have is a real respect for the people on the team, and a respect in what we do. And having respect and having trust can often work very well hand in hand with saying, that's just not good enough. you should be able to get to that. And that has to permeate throughout the team. It can't be just from one person, definitely.
And I suppose that's something that is very delicately maintained. And you, even yourself, you're often not quite there yet. Is that something that you would communicate to your team as well?
Yeah, I think they see that by the amount of fiddling I do on my decks. I mean, one of the things that I'm sure you guys have experienced it too, when you're invited to be a speaker, you tend to be asked to deliver your slides, 48 hours in advance so that the people have a chance to upload it, etc. Yeah. I hate doing that because I always fiddle with it till the end. Just little words here and there. I used to be an editor of an English magazine at university, and that stays with me. I'm a bit of I continue to edit. And that's just how I am.
Yeah, the example of that kind of approach makes me think of another fabulous female Harvard professor, Amy Edmondson. She does a lot of work on team psychological safety. And one of the things she talks about is that leaders need to be actively involved in modeling fallibility to their team members. So that there's an atmosphere of, this is not, I'm right and you're wrong. It's that we're all fallible and we're all just trying to do a good job.
Yeah, and that's something that I've had to learn, to be honest, because it's not a natural thing for me. And I have had to learn to be more openly vulnerable with the team. And it's been feedback that was given to me by some of my team members. So I take that on board.
That's really interesting. So that's a process of learning in teamwork that you have gone through as someone who's often in a leadership position.
Totally, yeah.
How did it feel getting that feedback, and what did you do?
So, feedback is a gift, as they say. I do truly believe that. And it was, once you hear it, you understand it. It's like one of those where the penny drops, and I could totally see it. And it did make me actively think harder about how I was coming across and actively finding opportunities where I would be openly more vulnerable, whereas normally I would have hid that back and glossed it over. And, I do actually now actively put it out there because I know that it helps. And I know that that's a weakness that I've had to work on. So yes, it's been helpful, honestly, genuinely helpful.
Lina, you recently posted on LinkedIn about your first experience with Ed Meyer, who sadly passed away recently. He was the CEO of Grey, I believe, for many, many years, a couple of decades. And you talk there about what the experience of that first meeting was like. And maybe you can recount what that meeting was like, but also I'm curious how that meeting, as a young executive with somebody at the top of their career, impacted your view on leadership. Did you take lessons of leadership from that first meeting that you still use today?
So to briefly recount the story, Ed Meyer was, as you say, a CEO of Grey Global for several decades. He built that agency from nothing to a global powerhouse. He was always known as a really, a giant, sort of figuratively and physically. Somebody who knew everything that was going on, was somewhat scary to go in front of. People would recount stories of trembling, sort of going in front of him, etc. And here was I, a little account director. I don't know. I was, I guess, in my late 20s or something, in Düsseldorf, this relatively small city in Germany, but a city where Grey actually was a big agency and had a big P&G business. And Ed Meyer grew up with P&G. So I guess that's what granted, me the opportunity of seeing him. And I happened to have had a trip to New York, and I thought, I'm going to reach out to the global CEO and see if he wants to give me a few minutes of his time, which was something that was completely unheard of. And when my boss found out later, he just thought, it's typically Alina to have done that. So I reached out to Ed and said, I'm in town. Would you have a few minutes for me? And he said yes. I went into his office, this really big, dark wood panel office on 3rd Avenue in New York. And he was incredibly warm and charming and gracious and made me feel quite welcome. And at the same time, pummeled me with questions about the business. I mean, he literally knew everything. It was about a brand called Punica, which P&G doesn't have anymore. It's like a Snapple type juice drink. So not a global brand, a local brand from Germany. he knew everything about it. He knew everything about the clients, and thankfully did sort of sound a few people out before going to him. And I was told, make sure you're well prepared. So I was well prepared. I knew my market shares and my, sales figures, that kind of stuff. And we wound up having a great conversation. So it was an incredibly positive experience. And I don't know if I learned it from that, Mark, to answer your question, but I have always, maybe it's also because of the industry that I'm in, I've always taken a lot of stock in young talent, and I really have always enjoyed working with and helping young talent blossom and taking their ideas and helping them channel them. But it is something that I'm a big believer in. I have a lot of young, talented people on my team. And I think that the chance to help young talent grow and blossom is something that we as leaders should always embrace and lean into.
You've been working in this industry, I think, for 25 plus years. Have you seen a change in the way young talent view the work, view the industry, and specifically to teamwork, the way that they naturally engage in teamwork and collaboration?
Yes, certainly you do. I guess especially lately, with so much of our work, or with so much less of our work happening in the same physical space, with our teams being more global and dispersed, with having to communicate virtually as well as in real life. That all has an impact on how young people learn and view the business and engage in teamwork. Some of it is good. A lot of it is good because you're more open to different ideas quicker and at greater sort of scale. And some of it is not so good because you don't have the time for these one-on-one relationship to almost job shadow somebody for a long time and learn through osmosis. That bit of it is gone to a great degree, I would say. And I think that's a shame, to be honest.
Do you think that holds back people who are, starting their careers now? Do you think that creates obstacles that as yet we're not sure exactly how they would overcome them?
Possibly. I tend to sort of always like to see the opportunity in these changes as opposed to the challenges. And I hate to be the one who says, oh, it used to be better in my days, because it makes you feel so old. But, it is different. It is different. I think that we will feel the difference between having, the benefit of really close individual relationships take part in somebody's individual growth. I think that that's a fact. Even myself, I miss some of the, mentoring that I had without us ever using the word mentorship. I mean, it didn't exist, right? But it was a natural mentoring process. Whereas now it tends to be, that you structure for it as opposed to it happens naturally. So I think that it's different. I don't know if it's going to be worse or anything's going to be missed, but the fact that we tend to structure for something that used to be a natural is already somehow slightly worse, I suppose. It just means that we need to overcompensate for it,
Yeah, I think that things kind of need labels and spaces in diaries and connections and things that just all of that was just ambient before. It was just there.
But I think it's just important to be conscious of it and compensate for it and find different ways of making it work in today's reality in such a way that it actually winds up being better as opposed to worse. And I think that that's possible. It's just a conscious effort.
One of the things that Andrew and I have actually been looking at is where the concept of teamwork even came from. So how did it develop through the 20th century? But it's so embedded in the fact that we by nature are social animals. That obviously we can do our best to work in fully virtual and fully remote environments, but whether we really can move so far away from our natural state of being, which is being around other people and collaborating. I think there's a big question about that. And obviously we're seeing a really big push back to the office from most people that have tried it for a couple of years. And I think it's exactly the things that you're talking about, especially young talent. It's something I've been reflecting on a lot recently. If I was to bring a junior member of staff, very junior, with no experience of work, they don't have the professional standards. can you inculcate those professional standards remotely? And the answer that I keep coming to is probably not. I probably need people to be in an office if they're very junior because they need to learn the basics.
Yeah. Well, I don't believe in fully virtual. I definitely don't. I think that you need to have some kind of a hybrid and make sure that you space your in real life experiences and plot them in the right parts of the journey of the individual community teams. Definitely. But in my view, fully virtual is not the way to go.
I've got a question which it's probably a very broad question. And you talked about the importance of the quality of the team feeling like they can deliver. So there are two elements to this. One is selecting into the team and one is selecting out of a team. So effectively how do you select people at any level, but potentially from junior talent? And then if somebody isn't performing, how do you address that lack of performance? Because obviously there's a big impact to a team of having somebody that isn't performing at the highest levels inside it.
Yeah. So very important, obviously. It reminds me of one of the first teams that I put together. One of the first integrated teams was for Pringles. And everybody knows Pringles. It's a very fun snack, right? It's all very uniform. And when we put the team together for that one, and you know how I said that I want the team culture to always be stemming from the brand, the product, the client, etc. In the case of a Pringles team, we called ourselves Pringles United, just to give you an example. And because of its playful nature, we said we want all of our team members to be players and people that we want to play with. Players being somebody who goes for the win, somebody who pushes themselves and others to achieve things, somebody who has fun in doing well, etc., and people that you want to play with, because we don't want individual performers. We want them to be part of a team, because otherwise it's not fun and you don't have a team. That became a part of our recruitment brief. And that became a part of our performance evaluation brief. If somebody is doing even well, let's say on the standard sort of delivering the workload type of elements, but they're not a player or they're not somebody I want to play with, they're not going to be hired and they're not going to last if they've been hired. And that, I think, is important for when you bring people into the team and when you evaluate whether or not these people stay. It's not just the content and it's not just the actual performance of the work. It's also the chemistry. Chemistry is hugely important in the team and how they interact with their individuals. And honestly, that's worked very well. So I gave you that as an example for Pringles, but we essentially have something like that for every team. And so it becomes quite obvious almost as to who you would hire and wouldn't hire based on whether or not they're going to fit on the team. And it becomes quite easy for when you do need to take the hard decision to separate from somebody. It becomes easy for the team in terms of how the team reacts to it, because it's sort of transparent and clear as to why. And it's also a really great way, it's kind of an unintended consequence of having very diverse teams. I mean, my teams are incredibly diverse, not because we've set out to tick certain boxes, but because we look for people who fit a certain standard in terms of their competencies, but fit a certain standard of how we want them to behave in a team and that chemistry.
I love the fact you use chemistry and not culture fit, as I think that's developing a bit of a reputation for unconscious bias. Do you have a special device measuring chemistry?
I'm afraid not. I think it's very intuitive.
I thought I might know the answer to that.
It's very intuitive.
Yeah, which makes it difficult, right? Because this feels right.
But there are certain, it does feel right. But I do think that there are certain ways of knowing when it's not there. And that's, yes, you have it as a feeling, but we are as a team, and I am personally, as an example, we hate politics, like very allergic to political gains. And you can spot that in a person. And then it's very clear that the chemistry is not going to be there because you can see that somebody's, a good sort of talker, but not going to be a doer, who's going to play politics, who's going to be about themselves and not the team. I mean, all of those things are relatively evident if you look for them in a person, and that will allow you to see whether or not they're going to be in a chemistry fit or not, I think.
We'd like to finish with some quick fires. First quick fire is, what are your team red flags?
Dishonesty, disrespect, inaction. I'm sure there are more.
And what? That's great. What is your best team working memory?
Does it have to be work, or can it be a fun part of the team?
It could be anything. It doesn't even have to necessarily be work. It
was work. So we had a global conference for Team P&G in LA, and the theme of that conference was Dare. We had big t-shirts with a big Dare across them. And one of the activities that we had as a team activity to fit with that theme was trapeze jumping. And I had to do that because obviously I was scared shitless. But I had to do it because I couldn't have the team do it and the leader wouldn't. So I went on a trapeze. And that's, I guess, it's a memory that stayed with me for a long time, is me being on a trapeze.
That's amazing. And also, it's funny how these things, they boil back down to some very basic things about trust and belief and supporting each other, right? Or dare you to do something, overcome your fears and trust.
By the way, not everybody liked it. Some of them, everybody went and did it, but some people cried. So it was quite an experience. Yeah. But yes, it's been etched in memories.
Yeah, great. Well, my final quickfire question is there a team-related resource that you would pass on? A book, a podcast, some kind of resource that you would pass on to others that is related to teamwork? So
I've mentioned her throughout, but I really do think that listening to Frances Fry, her podcasts on trust and the trust triangle, I think it was a TED Talk, in fact, but she also has a podcast on it, and several others in a book that she has just written on leadership and strategy. It's not specific on teamwork, but a lot of those aspects have to do with teamwork and how to lead,
of course,
fantastic teams. So I would really point people in the direction of Frances Fry and her work.
Well, Alina, thank you so much. Where can people find you if they wanted to follow you on LinkedIn or Twitter or TikTok or whatever you might be engaged in?
Oh, I admit I'm not hugely active, but if anything on LinkedIn, yes.
Okay, so they can find you Alina Kessel on LinkedIn. We'll put the link in the show notes as well. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been fascinating talking to you.
Thank you, guys. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it.
And that's it for today's episode, where we were joined by the fantastic Alina Kessel. We're incredibly grateful to Alina for taking the time to share her experiences of leading and working within teams with us today. Thanks to everyone for listening. We hope you'll join us again on the next episode of the Teamcraft podcast.